The G train. I've always hated riding the subway. It smells. It's always crowded. The people are either really rude, fairly creepy, nosy, chitty-chatty, or they smell. But hey, call me picky. I always tried to make sure that I sat next to people that were reading newspapers or holding briefcases and staring out the window. I knew these people would leave me alone. Paper readers minded their own business, and the briefcase holders were too tired from a long day's work to do any fair amount of chitty-chatting. I liked to be left alone. Unfortunately, on this late evening, the subway was pretty full. I had no choice but to sit down next to a man with no paper and no briefcase. He smiled and patted the empty seat next to him. I inhaled a deep breath and prepared to be annoyed. His name was Todd. I know because he told me the second I sat down. I barely had a chance to breathe. Todd was 54. He immediately wanted to know what my name was, where I was from, where I worked, my entire life story, yada, yada, yada. As I indulged him these details, trying not to sound annoyed, a young woman who looked to be no older than 25 was staring at us, intrigued by the conversation. Everyone is always so nosy. He told me about his wife, his 2 children who are off at university, his dog Rusty, his cat Mabel, his mother Terry, and half the people at his office. He droned on and on and on. And despite myself, believe it or not, I actually tried to get in a word edgewise once in a while, just to change it up. But he chatted away, droned on and on, viciously. Meanwhile, that girl was still staring at us, chewing obnoxiously on her gum. Her mouth hanging half open as she listened intently. I rolled my eyes. My new friend Todd didn't seem to notice, and neither did our nosy friend. Neither of them cared that I was annoyed. I looked out the window as Todd droned on and on, trying to drown out the sound of his droning on and the snap, smack, pop of nosy chick's gum. Weren't either of these 2 getting off at stops soon? This was becoming too much. Say, Todd, I said, how much longer until your stop? Just curious. Wanted to know if I needed to, stretch my legs to prepare to let you up. Oh, not for another 20 minutes, Todd said. I inwardly groaned. I knew it had to be done. Say, Todd, do you know that girl over there? She's been staring at you the entire time we've been talking. Todd looked over. I don't think so, he said. And just as I predicted, my new best friend, Todd, that I'd known for about half an hour, the longest half hour of my life, looked over at the girl and said, "Hey, do I know you?" The girl nearly choked on her gum. No, you don't, she said. How come you're staring at me then? He asked with no filter. The girl sat up straight, kind of embarrassed and nervous, both at the same time. It was great. Well, I was just confused. I thought maybe you were talking to me at first, but then I realized you weren't. Then I got really confused. What do you mean? Todd answered, confused himself. Well, she said, you've been talking non-stop for about half an hour, but I don't know who you're talking to. Todd looked at me. I grinned and shrugged. He looked back over at the girl. Ma'am, I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm obviously talking to my new friend over here, he said and pointed at me. What friend? There is no one sitting there, the girl exclaimed. Todd looked back at me as I slowly disappeared, grinning my ass off. He looked back at the girl and began to sweat, turning fairly pale. What's wrong? She asked. You look like you've seen the dead. Todd just nodded and picked up a newspaper that was sitting underneath the seat I had just been sitting in, flipped through the pages, and started to read. Okay, so I lied. It wasn't the longest half hour of my life. Time moves a little differently in my predicament.